Imagine walking 3 whole days just so you could sit through a marathon meeting or a series of meetings where you might not even be allowed to speak. Sounds absurd, doesn't it? But it's exactly how some of our earliest assemblies worked. These would be the precursors to our parliaments and legislatures, yes, but also to the group decision-making bodies for our local organizations, for not-for-profits, and yes, even for boards of directors. You could probably trace the origins of things like the meeting formats and rules and procedures that you use today back to people walking long roads so they could meet up with other people face to face. And as the roads got longer, the meetings got larger. It may not seem like it right now, but understanding how these long and chaotic gatherings got started might change the way that you think about your meetings today. All right, let's jump in. Many of us think of government, of not-for-profits, corporations, and boards as being built on laws, on structure, and on systems. But before there was any of that, before parliaments were recognized legal entities, before assemblies designed and developed volumes of rules and procedures, people met. And they met across history, and they met across time. Now, of course, there were the councils in ancient Greece and ancient Rome, deliberative assemblies across Asia, and sophisticated systems of governance and group decision-making throughout the Americas and beyond. But this story focuses on one thread: the uneven road from the royal councils of medieval Europe to the structured meetings that many of us are part of today. These early gatherings weren't driven by law or principle. They were driven by need. Sometimes rulers just needed advice. Sometimes they needed money. Other times they needed to avoid a revolt. And so they called people together, but not everyone. These were still small, exclusive gatherings. Nobles, bishops, trusted allies, people with power and influence back home. And still, not everyone was allowed to speak. The rest were there to nod their head and show their support. The point wasn't debate or discussion, it was appearances. The point was to show unanimity and give the ruler's decisions the appearance of consensus. Still, something happens when people gather together. Even when they're not equal, even when the outcomes have already been decided. They see each other, they hear each other. And when people get used to being called together, they start to imagine that they should have a say. Imagination is powerful, and once imagination takes hold, it's hard to turn back. These gatherings may have started as symbolic gatherings, but symbols are powerful, and they can take on a life of their own. The early assemblies were called as a show of strength for the ruler. But power isn't just a one-way street, at least not forever. Because when a ruler stands in front of a group of people, and especially if that group of people holds power and influence of their own, and then asks them for something, advice, loyalty, money, the people listening start to realize that the ruler wants something from them. And if the ruler wants something from them, they can make demands. That's leverage, and leverage changes everything. In 1295, King Edward summoned what would become known as the Model Parliament, not out of idealism, but out of necessity. See, the king needed to raise funds for war, and not just from the nobles and clergy, but from the towns and shires. I'm going to share a quote with you from author Michael Nash, who wrote about this in his article, Crown, Woolsack, and Mace, the Model Parliament of 1295. Parliament in 1295 was assembled for a deep political purpose. The formal language of the writs summoning the wide range of representatives to Parliament reflected this. "Inasmuch as a most righteous law of the emperors," wrote Edward I, "ordains that what touches all should be approved by all, so it evidently appears that common dangers should be met by the remedies agreed upon in common." King Edward brought more people to the hall at Westminster than ever before. The summons included the lower clergy for the first time. Sheriffs were to send 2 knights from every county, 2 burgesses from every borough, and 2 citizens from every city. 7 earls and 42 barons were summoned by name. The clergy and baronage were there to treat, ordain, and execute. The representatives of the commons were to have full powers from those whom they represented to execute what should be ordained by the Common Council. Now, scholars disagree as to whether or not the Model Parliament was in fact the very first template for all of the parliaments that followed. But one thing is certain. This was an era of evolution for assemblies. What happened on the eve of the 14th century were the beginnings of a structural relationship to conditional power. Yes, we'll fund your war, but only if you redress our grievances. As you could imagine, there was a fair amount of chaos during this era of change. People would try as best they could to get the edge on debate and discussion, to have influence over the entire assembly and have their ideas accepted by all. When voices and demands multiply, you need clear rules to make sense of it all. This opened the door to a new phase in development. How to formalize how meetings and assemblies are conducted. The need for clear rules about how decisions get made and who gets to make them leads to important questions that need to be resolved, like who gets to speak, in what order, for how long, and what constitutes a final decision. Establishing procedures become necessary. It's a way to leverage influence, establish order, and hold royal power to account. We've now fully crossed over into a new stage of deliberative self-governance, where the process is just as important as the outcome. So now we have large groups of people making important decisions, and the most precious commodity is time. Whoever controls the group's time controls their focus and attention. So rules around motions and debate, rules around amendments and voting, they're not technical details. They shape which issues get discussed and which voices get heard. They determine what is debated and what is ignored, and how decisions get made. This is why internal rules matter. It's why the next several hundred years of parliamentary history are spent by ensuring that members of the Commons are able to control their own proceedings. It's also why you and your organization will benefit if you pay special attention to your own rules of order and decision frameworks. Rules alone cannot guarantee fairness. But without them, the loudest voices in the room tend to dominate, and power concentrates quickly. So over the years, assemblies developed procedures, rules that would govern who could speak, when, how long, what the group would focus on, and how it would decide. These were hard-won tools to manage group attention and individual participation. It took centuries of trial, conflict, and refinement. And throughout all that chaos, they were constantly being tested by monarchs, by the courts, and by the people who refused to be silent. It turns out the chaos wasn't a flaw in the system. It was the point. When people meet, they bring their doubts, their differences, and their demands. They bring their perspectives, their lived experience, and their hopes for what could be. Every voice at the table brings something that others might not be able to see. And that's how stronger decisions, stronger organizations, and stronger communities are built. It's noisy, it's slow, and it's imperfect. But out of the noise, something can emerge, something better than one person alone could be able to build. And that's why we meet. That's why we continue to walk the long road. All right, meeting adjourned for this episode of Parliamentary Inquiry. If you found this interesting or helpful, hit the like button and remember to drop any questions that you have down in the comment section. If you're looking for step-by-step breakdowns of procedural items, check out the series Order of Business. If you're interested in more long-form conversation around issues pertaining to meeting rules and procedure, check out Point of Order. If you're looking for general insights into how to make your meetings more effective, The Monthly Grind is the series for you. For now, why not watch one of these two videos here or here, and I will see you next time.